directives, including new policies on procedural justice and wellness. Additionally, the team updated the suite of mental health related policies that are the central focus of the DOJ settlement agreement. They also significantly overhauled the Bureau's policies pertaining to force, reporting, and review, establishing clearer standards for the authorized use of force and accompanying reporting and investigative requirements. The team also revised two important operational policies related to foot pursuits and conducting searches. The updated directive, which is 650, search and seizure and inventories, establishes a more procedurally just practice informed by community feedback and changes to state law for performing consent searches. And in the equity arena, in 2022, PPB's Equity and Inclusion Office completed the Bureau's 5-year racial equity plan. It also recruited and welcomed new Equity Advisory Council members and hired an equity analyst to help identify and mitigate disparities. The Bureau's recruitment efforts were revamped, and the Bureau received 1,513 applications for police officers in 2022, and we hired 80 new officers. In addition to in-service and the other academies, PPB continued its commitment to online training videos through the Learning Management System, or LMS. The video production unit worked with the Equity and Inclusion Office to complete a 4-part training video series on Directive 640, interacting with members of the LGBTQIA2S+ or queer community, completion of informal interpreters, the 5th video in the series of language and culture trainings. As for wellness, the Bureau commitment to its wellness program is vital for retention and to ensure the mental, emotional, and physical wellness of its members. The city has made a significant investment in the Bureau's wellness program, and work began to procure services related to cardiac screening, an in-house mental health professional, and additional training for peer coaches. The wellness program organized and led an internet protection service for all members and began pilot programs on healthy food options, sleep classes, and conducted surveys to better understand the needs of members. Under data-driven policing, 2022, PPB's East Precinct began a series of stolen vehicle missions. Stolen vehicles had increased drastically over the last year, 40% citywide, and the precinct office a nexus between stolen vehicles and weapons. In order to ensure these missions were informed and data-driven, PPB SVO, or Stolen Vehicle Operations, leadership approached scientists at OHSU and the Knight Cancer Institute School of Medicine, who agreed to review both the data and methodology. As a result, evidence-based practices have been refined through the unique collaboration with OHSU and have dramatically increased team success. In 2022, East Precinct conducted 15 stolen vehicle missions. East Precinct recovered 106 stolen vehicles with a recovery value of almost $1.2 million. East Precinct personnel made 169 arrests, served 187 warrants, and seized 24 illegally possessed firearms. These missions have been very successful in not only recovering stolen vehicles, but reducing crime in the precinct overall. In early 2022, Portland began to see the number of patrons to the city's entertainment district continue to grow coming out of the pandemic. Data made it clear that Central Precinct would need to restaff the entertainment detail. Precinct resources were reorganized to reinstate a limited entertainment detail, or E-detail. The detail provided patrol coverage for liquor serving establishments within the precinct area and was committed to ensuring a safe environment for community members participating in nightlife events. To accomplish this goal, the unit had 3 basic functions: monitor crowds, intervene at the lowest level to incidents beginning to cause tension to de-escalate the situation, and conduct follow-up on all calls for service involving liquor serving establishments in Central Precinct. Since reconstituting the E-detail, the number of shootings within the entertainment district remained at 0 by December of 2022. Illegal speed racing continues to be a seasonal issue, mostly impacting North Precinct. Multiple missions focusing on the behavior were organized from July through September of 2022, with support from other internal divisions. The missions resulted in some warnings, vehicles towed, and arrests. PPD personnel witnessed a great reduction in the number of individuals attending the events, from several hundred down to several dozen people. The CERT, or Special Emergency Reaction Team, we call CERT, has worked without a backup team since July of 2020. That, combined with many of its longtime members retiring, put a strain on this unit. In August of 2022, PPB signed a mutual aid agreement with the City of Gresham and the Multnomah County, securing East Metro as its backup team. PPB will work to develop its relationship with East Metro through training and team activations. Community outreach and community engagement. Behavioral Health Unit facilitated 99 trainings and outreach events in 2022. In addition to internal trainings and events, the members of the Behavioral Health Unit were presented to groups involving local houses of worship, hotels, business alliances, neighborhood associations, nonprofits, and businesses. Members of BHU participated in events with multiple organizations, including Central City Concern, the Oregon State Hospital, Native American Rehabilitation Association, Critical Assessment and Treatment Center, New Avenues for Youth, and others. The Office of Community Engagement integrated the PPB Bias Crime Unit with community advisory councils to improve communication, trust-earning efforts, and allow for crucial exchange. Office of Community Engagement, or OCE, has facilitated many other community meetings, workshops, and cultural engagements that allowed for fostering mutual relationships. The Bureau continued conducting its Community Police Academy, in which community members work with their police officer partners in a day-long setting of classroom and practical scenarios. PPB also continued its Community Active Shooter Preparedness, or CASP, which has delivered about 200 classes to safety-impacted community organizations and businesses since 2013. And there was a Bureau of Justice Assistance community-based crime reduction grant. One part of the grant explored impacting public trust and satisfaction with the police-involved enhanced outreach to crime victims. Prior research found that criminal victimization leads to the development of negative attitudes towards police. This is particularly true among people who use online systems to report their crimes. Most law enforcement agencies send a single automated email to the victim with an incident number for use with insurance claims. In 2022, North Precinct worked to address this by adding enhanced victim follow-up contacts. Officers contacted each victim via phone or email 2 weeks after their initial report. Using a script based on the concepts of procedural justice, they communicated concern for the victim, gave the victim an opportunity to voice complaints about their experience, and offered guidance on preventing re-victimization. Preliminary findings based on hundreds of surveys indicated that victims who received the follow-up contact were significantly more likely to be satisfied with the overall police response as compared to victims who did not receive the additional outreach, roughly 46% versus 13%. These findings were published in various reviews, including the Western Society of Criminology, Lexipol, Police Chief Magazine, and the European Society of Criminology. So that's the executive summary. The rest of the report picks engagement, crime, investigations, things of that nature. And then there's a bunch of different stats. And typically the precinct command wants to get into the specific stats for that precinct and their ability. But that's the summary.
Thank you, Chief. I think what we're going to do is start with PCCEP members. There's a number of members that have put together some questions, and I think we'll start with that, and then we'll we'll move around to some other people that might have public comments, and I do have comments from a community member that I'm going to share tonight as well. So I think I'll start with that. How did PPB gain community input on the 20 directives? Was there any community feedback involved in that, Chief?
Yeah, we post our directives for public review. So before they're actually members, whoever wants to can go online and make comments, make suggestions, things of that nature.
Is there any community, I know that in the past talked about in our meetings some of the directives. Are there any other community groups that are doing that right now?
I don't know if there's any specific community groups that do it. Like I said, everyone has the opportunity to post it for public comment, but PCCEP might be the only group that does it as a kind of a combined or a structured organization.
Thank you. I read through the report and difficult conversations. I think that's really great. Having difficult conversations weekly, I think that's wonderful. Prior, you all have talked about the ABLE training, and I'm wondering if you're still offering that to officers.
For it to officers, it actually has a yearly component. So when you roll it out, you have to train officers yearly on it. So there's follow-up, and we'll do that again this year. And I think for the current, I think there's 3 years worth of actual recurring. So this will be the second year, and then we'll do it the third year. But it'll be kind of the follow.
And I'm interested, I know this is a look back, but at what your new training dean is going to be doing and the plans that you're going to be fanning out amongst the rank. 2 more questions or comments. I don't understand the officer shortage when you have 1,500 applicants and you hired 80 new officers. For as long as I've been a PCCEP member, which I think I'm the oldest PCCEP member here, I've heard that no one wants to be an officer. Those are good numbers, 1,500 people. So can you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, that is actually a good number of applicants. As we go through the process, weed out a lot. I don't know why. It's been this way for a long time, since I was in the personnel division. A fair amount of your applicants you never hear from after they actually apply. I'm not sure why they actually apply, or if they're doing it for some other purpose, but I would say, you know, in my time there, about half of them you would never hear from them again after the initial application. So that number gets weeded down drastically from the application process. Then when you get into the actual background, the interviews, the psych and the med, that's how you kind of go from that 1,500 to hiring 80. It's a big trickle down, though, from the application process to the next step.
So are you still needing more officers? Is there still a shortage?
Yeah, we are. We're about 80 officers down from our authorized strength.
Okay. Lastly, then I'm going to turn it over to Ashley. I went on a ride along with an officer, and the officer was telling me that they'd really like EIC refresher training yearly. I don't know if you've heard that, but I think that would be really great to incorporate moving forward.
What training was that?
EIC.
Okay.
A refresher course, because I was over in East Precinct, and the officer I was with said that they run into often where Okay.
I'll make a
Ashley,
note.
thank you.
Yeah, sure. I have a couple questions, but I think I wanted to start with, asking who is this report targeted for? As in, who should be walking away understanding more about what's going on in the bureau? If this is sort of an community engagement piece, if that's the case. But just wanted to kind of hear from you, Chief, about who you're writing this report to. Thank you.
This report is it's really kind of for anyone. A lot of people like the stats that are specific to their neighborhood or their area or their precinct, but I think it's just a good way to encapsulate, record, and tell the story about a particular year at the police bureau. I think some people view this as like kind of a state of the police bureau, but it's really not. It's really kind of this is the things that happened, the highs, the lows, the challenges from the previous year. A lot of people, police bureaus at, and it gives them something to sift through and something to refer to if they have specific questions about crime in their neighborhood, about what the police bureau did or needs to do.
Awesome. And I figured that was kind of the answer. And I think I was definitely reading this as a community member, somebody not sort of in the know too much and hasn't read too many past reports, as I'm a new PCCEP member. And so I think the feedback I just wanted to provide was there seemed to be a lot of internal language or kind of like internal jargon used. And I know we probably all experience that in our own professional settings. I work at a government agency. We always talk in acronyms. I volunteer with my PTA. There's a common language in there. And I guess I just wanted to provide that feedback that if this is for what's going on, that kind of going back and checking to make sure that the language used is accessible. And by that, I mean, I know it's small, but spelling out acronyms and explaining them sort of in the beginning when they're first introduced is kind of a professional way, sort of set the stage and make sure that people understand what they're reading forward. Like for example, on page 22, in the reference to the neighborhood response team NRT and the bicycle unit, it was explained like the NRT was spelled out and it was bicycle unit was in the heading, but as you read through, there was reference to the bikes, and I think I just took that away as that's kind of like some internal language that's used, that like we're all sharing the common language as we're reading the report, and like a little things like the Independent Monitor LLC being spelled out, that wasn't spelled out, and I think another group had mentioned that. So it seems little, but I think that kind of breaking away from that common jargon will create more connection for the community to understand what you're trying to relay.
Okay, thank you.
Nathan.
Okay. I guess first of all, I'll say this was a interesting reading. I thank everyone for the effort in the report. I don't have too much else other than what I put in the public comment ahead of time. It did just occur to me something that might be useful, and sorry if I missed it. In some of the reports that I see, I like to put in a list of acronyms, and so like all the acronyms in the report might be useful. Apologies if I missed that. I was just skimming through. And then I want to echo this comment to reflect on the need for that versus the need to keep staffing levels at the precincts and on patrol. Challenges.
On the annual report in the
precincts. First question is, I noticed that you have online capacity for getting input on the directives, and I'm wondering, are there other methods you're exploring to get a broader representation of public concerns, community concerns? And one of the reasons I'm asking that is, even though we've made tremendous leaps and bounds as a metropolitan area in getting people online, I think a lot of the people who are most likely to have challenging encounters with the police don't always have access to the internet and don't always have access to the police website. And so I was curious as to what methods you might be exploring to expand the capacity for input on that.
Yeah, thank you for that, Celeste. That's a good question. Typically, the feedback we receive is online. When we do present these at the precincts, there are virtual, but the public does have the opportunity to ask questions there. Maybe there is some potential to do some other type of outreach for the policy team. Take the feedback. We incorporate some things that we can, not everything all the time, but that's kind of the process. But I think it might be worthwhile to explore if there's some other way to solicit that feedback that's not online, maybe an in-person opportunity now that the pandemic's over.
Yes, and to help you not have to reinvent the wheel, there are a lot of community organizations that have a broad footprint in the community. And you've got Urban League, you've got NIA, you've got Self-Enhancement. And so maybe setting up a town hall type meeting where you can do that outreach and then get that input with these groups might be a helpful way. And one of the things that PCCEP is supposed to help the Bureau do is expand your capacity for community engagement. So having these kinds of partners, I think, would be, well, it'd be very helpful for you. Sharing the annual, thought I had seen it in the report, but I can't find it right now. Settlement agreement, there is a requirement to have these meetings to discuss changes maybe in directives, et cetera, et cetera. So I was wondering how that dynamic is going to be unfolded and rolled out for this report.
Yeah, so we'll advertise the dates once we go back and finalize the presentation. We'll pick dates. I think they're typically July, August timeframe, and we will present this at each of the precincts, and the community is invited to come. We've done it virtually the last few years, but I think this year, I'm not sure if they'll be in person or virtually. I'm sure there'll be a virtual option, but that'll be the opportunity for people to come and hear the information, give feedback, ask questions, and they'll have access to the precinct commander too for any precinct specific information. So that's how we've done it in the past.
And so, given the fact that the city is now committed to having hybrid meetings, is that something you're looking at doing? Your influence and your opportunities for meeting with folks?
Yeah, as much as our central precinct is not really conducive to meeting space, but our north precinct has a large community room. Our east precinct also a large community room. We do hold different types of community meetings in there, so that might be central precinct. We have to figure out another option.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
I have a quick follow-up question since it's come up a few times. Two things. How is, like, what is like the turnout, or like how has the engagement been at those precinct meetings for the report? And then I guess same question as it relates to the directive review generally, because I'm familiar with that process, but I'm not too familiar with how much community input PPB receives on those.
You know, I'd say it varies on the policy review side. There are some policies that are very, for lack of a better word, mundane, where we don't get it's kind of like tweaks of wording, and it's on items that aren't of huge public interest. But there are some that get a lot of feedback depending on the topic. One, like grooming standards is one where we get a lot of feedback from people. And like I said, it can be internal people or external, but that one seems to get a lot of feedback. And I think it just depends on the policy, what the level of public interest is on it. And then the precinct meetings kind of vary. I think they're anywhere between 50 to 80 people, depending on the precinct. And they're usually in the evenings, and it's usually kind of, I would say this time of day. And they're usually, say, about an hour and a half or so. So it just depends, but I'd say 50 to 80 is about the turnout.
Thank you.
Hello, this is Tia Palafox. I haven't heard what the follow-up was after the negative officer feedback of the LGBTQ training. Are you expecting those officers to follow the training directives even when they did not agree with the training?
Yes, I do. I expect officers to follow all directives. And I think that's the purpose of the directive, is to have something to hold people accountable to. So I think that, is really important.
And was that in 2022? I feel like it was just this year.
No, that was this year. Yeah, so that's not really, the training itself actually took place in 2022.
Oh, okay.
So that's why it's mentioned, but the comment portion was this year.
Thank you.
I think we can go to, let's see, we have a few hands up. How about TJ Browning?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Chief, I have a suggestion on getting out the directives to the public for comment. I organized, I was one of the co-organized neighborhood association citywide summit in March. We had 60 neighborhoods show up and did a survey before they attended to find out what they were interested in. And obviously livability and safety was huge on their list of interests. And the majority of them sent their safety committee chairs. I mean, they came from all over the city. So they have the neighborhood associations have very active committees that are engaged in public safety issues. And I think that if you, obviously there's a list of them in the Office of Civic Life, email list. I think that if you sent that out to those safety committees, they were from all over the city. There wasn't a portion of the city that was not represented at this summit. I think you would get some valuable feedback from people who are engaged with their communities. That's all. That's just the suggestion I have. I'm done.
All right. Thank you for that, TJ.
Thank you. Dan Handelman.
Hello, good evening. This is Dan Handelman. I use he, him pronouns. And I'm with a community organization called Portland Cop Watch that has commented on over 130 of the directives over the last 9 years. And so I just want to make it clear that there is a community organization that has been weighing in on these directives. We do it very regularly. We missed a few months when your server went down and we weren't receiving emails about them, which is an important way to reach the community, I think. So I'm glad you got that. That's it. It's on your annual report and PCCEP members. We sent in early comments, and unfortunately the formatting of the public posted version cut out paragraph breaks and two of our subject headings, and one of them is really important. I'll get to that in a second. The first thing we pointed out is that the shooting death section is very thin, considering that this was the first time since 2001 there were 9 deadly force incidents by police officers in 1 year. So we were hoping to have a little bit more focus on why that might have happened. Then we pointed out one of our subject matters is, do Black Lives Matter? Because one of the people killed by the Portland police this past Emmanuel Clark Johnson, that was the first time Portland police have killed a black man since early 2019. And so that's one of the things that gets the community really worked up. And I think the Bureau recognizes that, and it would be good to sort of be upfront about that. There's nothing, there's no value judgment in saying facts like this is the first time the PPB has killed a black man since 2019. In fact, people who think it happens on a more regular basis might be surprised. And in that same subject heading, we talked about the traffic stop data, which doesn't talk about the disparities. And one of the requirements of the DOJ agreement presentation of the report is to talk about bias-based policing. So I'm hoping that you'll flesh that out a little bit and put some more data in there. Then we have a section about accountability, where we noted that the word accountability only is referred to once in the entire document to talk about holding officers accountable. And there is a whole list of internal affairs and all these cases they looked at, but there's nothing about the outcomes. How many officers were disciplined? How many were fired? That would be good to put in there if you want to try to get the community up to speed on what's going on. We talked about force data. A lot of that focus on that is force against people in mental health crisis, which is, of course, the focus of the settlement agreement, but it doesn't talk more broadly about use of force. Even if you're only focusing on people in mental health crisis, the majority of people who are shot by the Portland police are in mental health crisis, and that should be mentioned in that area as well. Then we have a whole subject about crowd control and community engagement issues, that report about the crowd control issues from 2020. It says here it's going to come out in spring of 2023. Which leaves about a week for that to happen. I don't know if that's going to happen. I hope it does. And we noted that of the community advisory groups, the LGBTQIA plus community group, the roundtable, which could be responding to those concerns that the PCCEP member was talking about a minute ago, was disbanded in 2022. But that's not part of this report either. We have a section about engaging with the federal government. A section about language matters. You heard a little bit about from somebody else, but one of our concerns is the use of the word cleanups when you mean homeless camp sweeps. We have a subject matter on budget and staffing, where you pointed out, now of course this happened just this year, but the Bureau just got staff money for 43 more officers, but you've just said, Chief, that there's 80 slots you can't fill right now. So, it's just sort of, why don't we see what happens when we get those 80 seats? Cadets and people who work volunteer for the traffic division. And then we have the thing that's called bearing the lead, and somebody at PCCEP tried to correct our writing on that. It's LEDE is how you say that when you use that term. We had it corrected originally. But the point is, the wellness program, the chief that you spoke about, it says very deep like on page 71 of the report, that 1/3 of the officers who are considering leaving said one of the reasons they decided to stay was because of the wellness program. And I think that's phenomenal. So I think that should be in the executive summary. So that's a lot of things for you to chew on, respond to whatever you like, but I really appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Dan. Those are some good suggestions, actually. I'm writing down some notes here, and I'll see what we can incorporate into this report prior to finalizing it for the precinct presentations.
And Chief, can you explain the 43 officer positions for folks?
Yeah, those 43 aren't new positions. Those are positions that were on our books but were not funded. The funding for those was used for other, mostly professional staff positions. So they were part of the 882 that were authorized. The money we received was just to essentially fund those positions. So we wouldn't essentially take what would have been a cut of those 43 positions had the funding. We've got a lot of retirements too, so it's kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But my hope is that this year we'll get into the arena where we're hiring into those 43.
Thank you. Leslie, you had your hand up. Did you have a question, or did you want to wait?
Yeah, I just had a couple of thoughts, but for the most part, I mean, I'll just kind of talk about the length of this. If you mentioned at the very beginning, like that this is for the community members. One of my concerns is the length of this document and figuring out a way to make it more I think Ashley talked about the accessibility of it, making sure that things are spelled out and things are, easy to navigate so that people can find what they're looking for if they're interested in just certain sections. And I also had a similar concern of what Dan noted about like the shootings. It's a very small section in a very large document. I think the other thing that I'm missing, but maybe it's just me, and maybe that's not the purpose of the document, is just some of these areas where you're talking about, like for example, the shootings and then some of these things. It's a very I don't see, which is good, but then there's also I don't think there's enough mention of like, we're talking about increasing homicide rates. There's a lot of overdoses that you mentioned and stuff like that. So some of the things that you're doing to help with those efforts, I think would be also beneficial to include in this report. But if that's not the purpose of this report, a different platform of letting the community know, because I think ultimately the community wants to know what is being done to fix some of the things that they see that are getting worse. So that's just one of my thoughts. If this isn't the document to do it in, that's where can the community hear that comprehensively?
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me, Leslie. I think, like I said before, this is more like almost a statistical recap or like a conglomeration of a particular year document at that point. But I think that is a worthwhile endeavor, just to tell the story. This is how we're trying to, just so no one sees this problem, no one's working on this problem kind of feeling.
This is Pastor Wisner. The community was only given 10 days to review the document, and we'd like to hear your response to the why, and then is it possible to extend the window to create it, review longer period during the future?
Well, they'll have time to review it. We give it to PCCEP early, just so you can have it to review, and then we meet with you before the precinct meetings take place. So when we put it out, the community will have ample time before the precinct meetings take place to actually see it.
It would just
Chief, if I add to that, Pastor Widener, we're looking to leave the public comment on this open until June 30th. And then we were hoping to have it closed by then so that we could finalize this report and get it out on our website the first week in July, hopefully, so that the public will have, we're planning those precinct weeks or more to be able to review it before the precinct meetings. So if you're ready to send any written comments to us.
And can I just kind of follow up on that comment that Wisner just mentioned, because I do think that while we're getting it really is a platform for the community, and so that they come here to say things out loud. So even if they will have until June 30th, I think there is value in hearing directly from people. And so I think there is, even though they have until June 30th, it sounds like it's just going to be written commentary and not, you all hearing what the community are, or like what different members of the community want to say about it if they had more time to read through it. So I think that's kind of, I don't know, that's my, I don't know that that's exactly what you were saying, Pastor Wisner, but that would be why I think it would be better if there was a little longer review time before this type of meeting.
Wonderfully said, Leslie. And my point is, again, to have PCCEP to have a meaningful input on it. it's the short time. It was just kind of, so thank you.
I have a comment from a community member. Chief, in surveillance technologies. Lavelle's letter to the auditor specifically states it will include in the annual report, but in the draft I saw it's included. Why, and will that be updated on the final? And who from PPB is tracking comments made in?
Yeah, I have to look into that one specifically. I know the auditor had looked at some of the intel reporting stuff at the police bureau, and we gave a response to that. So I have to see if it's that or if it's something else in particular.
I'll send that to you.
Okay, thanks, Ann.
TJ, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but comment that the chief made, I just had triggered a question for me. I was on the Bureau Advisory Committee for about 7 years, Chief, and I haven't been on it for well over a decade. And at that time, through those 7 years, we were struggling to get the Bureau up to 1,200 officers, which at that time was considered full force. That was over a decade ago, and Portland was a lot smaller. Issues and problems that we have now. So the number you announced of being full force is can you explain that to me? That just doesn't, based on my history, that doesn't seem, I'm not being critical, I'm just really curious because I'm based on my history, that does not gel with my numbers. Sorry.
Yeah, no, those sadly are the correct numbers. When I started here in 2002, we had about 1,000 officers. Today, I think we have 806, I think, is the last number I saw this week. And that's sworn officers. So that's from the rank of police officer all the way up to chief. And, 21 years ago when I started, we had a lot less people in Portland. But we had 5 police precincts then. We have 3 today. I think throughout the years, we've taken a lot of cuts in years that the city was actually doing well. And, I think over time, public safety in general in Portland has receded while the city has been growing. And I think that's part of the reason we find ourselves in the situation we do today. So we're really working hard to get up to that 82 number. And then we really need to grow it from there. Many years ago.
So that isn't a mandated thing that you have to stop at that point? Because that's what I thought you were saying. So.
Well, that's what we're authorized for. Should we reach that 82 number? I'm sure there'd be a conversation about increasing that number, finding funding for that, just to get back up to, whatever the right number is. There's a lot of folks in the community safety division who are doing kind of staffing study of sorts to see what the right number is. But we definitely need more police officers than we have today. That's for certain.
And I don't want to have a, but the response time is alarmingly slow. And again, I'm not being critical because I look at those numbers, I understand why. And I'm assuming that is factored into the need. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is for sure. A lot of factors kind of go into it. Part of it too is how much free time you would need to actually do community engagement as well. The calls for service are a factor in there, but there's also things like, what is Portland Street Response going to evolve into? Will that take a certain amount of the call load away from police? As the PS3 or Public Safety Support Specialist program grows, will that give some time savings to uniform sworn officers? And things like that are all kind of factored into that number. People always ask me, what's the number that you need? Is it 1,100? Is it 1,200? And it's hard to say without really accounting for these other programs and these other things that are happening. And we have today by a pretty good amount, I would say.
Quick interjection for anyone who missed the chat. We've decided to breeze through the break because we already have, and then try to end a bit early instead. So thanks for hanging with us. And also, I just want to make sure any of our community members in person, if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand and we can come to you. And then likewise, continue on. Anyone at all with a question virtually or in person, just raise your hand. Thanks.
I see Barbara has her hand raised. Go ahead.
Thank you for this discussion. I'm Barbara Sheher, Portland Cop Watch. But although I'm speaking from my own, I was reading, on the advanced community input that you sent out that link to. Kate Sattler was talking about, her last two paragraphs are about the amount of money put into, say, surveillance and technology and the police in various ways, when that may be what we need to do, which I do believe put in direct, that these can pull resources from essential public services and an upstream approach of ensuring everyone has housing, healthcare, and other basic needs. Police department, I'm not saying you personally, but a lot of the police are not that interested in supporting Portland's street response, which has been shown to be very effective in dealing with people in crisis. And as a person, family member, well, he's in a nursing home now, but he used to get in, he has schizophrenia, he used to get in trouble, and it was, dealing with him, but having these services and stuff is more important than the surveillance, I guess, is, yeah. So having somebody like street response would have been helpful to deal with him rather than, say, a police officer. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I can appreciate that, Barbara. I think, and I'm in support of street response. My hope is that they can reach their goals and take off a percentage of the, the lower acuity calls that, we in turn won't have to go to. And I think that's what they're designed for, and I think that's, where they could serve the city best.
Thank you.
Leslie?
Yeah, just following up on what Barbara said as well, because I can understand that, especially right now with, how people are feeling. There seems to be this call of like, enforce and find solutions that are preventing, that are preventing the issues that we're seeing, rather than like more prevention rather than enforcement, so that's kind of where I would like to, that's why I support Portland Street Response and programs that provide resources so that we have to have the problem rise, community safety in that way. So that was just a sidebar. My real question is, how many languages is this document going to be translated into?
How many languages? I think we do it in the five languages. I'd have to double check to see.
Okay, perfect. Just wanted to make sure that it was accessible to, communities as a whole. And then other than just posting it online, is there plans to go to the different communities and do some engagement there with them to kind of explain this? Because again, as we talked about, this is a very long document with a lot of jargon. So I think it'd be beneficial for, once it's finished, really doing some direct outreach and talking people through it.
Okay, and just for the record, I agree agree with you, Leslie, too, about the outreach and the other services. We the police aren't going to be able to do everything alone. We depend heavily on partners and outreach workers, Office of Violence Prevention, to do a lot of violence prevention work. And I definitely recognize that there's a lot of work to be done, and there's a lot of room for others other than the police to be helping out. So I appreciate you for that.
Thank you. Stephanie, see your hand?
Hi there. I just realized that some of this discussion has triggered that I can put in the link in the chat right now a link to a work session that's going to happen tomorrow afternoon at council. It will be recorded so people can watch the video anytime that's convenient. Of that is to begin a dialogue around a call allocation study that was commissioned by the Community Safety Division, looking at how our first response system, and primarily focused on how we're dispatching first responders and identifying whether there are some opportunities there to help lower those call response times and address getting specialized resources to the right location and all of that. So I just wanted to put that in there for folks to be aware of, interested in watching and participating in that. And it should be a good overview of the many different systems are part of our first response. The goal there being to find how we can use them for their highest and best purpose, and creating systems that help them to function as efficiently and effectively as they can. So that would include police, Portland Street Response, fire, BOAC, all of that stuff. So to mention some of those concerns.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Oh, Dan, I see your hand again. Go ahead.
Yeah, when the break item was mentioned, I didn't realize this Q&A is supposed to go all the way till 7:50 p.m. So I didn't want to take up more time, but if there are no other hands, I'm happy to talk a little bit more. Chief, one of the things we also raised is the question that you said that the detectives investigated 13 shootings involving police, and 9 of them were by Portland. We tried to figure out if the other 4 were the ones involving Clackamas County, Multnomah deputies, and the U.S. Marshal. So I wonder if you can clarify some of that. We also had a concern that we've raised several times about the change in policy that was made in 2022, but it's not mentioned in the report, to the release of officer names that got made in December based on alleged threats to police officers. That is, you're still enacting today. In fact, the last shooting took 17 days instead of 15 days to release the name of the officer involved, and there's been no publication of your executive memo that we've seen, and there's no mention of it here on your report. The accountability issue that I raised before, there's also the outcomes and about such as discipline sometimes is mentioned in the IPR annual reports, but even if you end up publishing it in 2 places, I think that's okay. There's also talk about 20 officers who had unplanned separations, which sounds kind of like George Orwell. I don't know what that means. So we were trying to figure out what that was, and using public data, we found there were 33 resignations, 27 retirements, and 1 layoff. So can you explain what does it mean when it says unplanned separations? Thank you.
Yeah, my guess is the unplanned separations are probably resignations. I'd have to look, though, to see for sure. Sometimes the resignations are planned, and I think some of them are for reasons like family health care situations or things like that probably make up that unplanned segment. But I can double check that. And the one policy you referenced was the one around the change to the release of officer names, and that was made as via executive order because of safety. We typically release those names, I think it was within 24 hours, essentially, early. We're very, very quick and very transparent, but we found ourselves in a place too where people were using that release of the name to go to officers' houses, make threats. We had to have one of our OISs, we had to have the FBI investigate some doxing that was taking place. And we realized that some people were using that early release in a manner that just was not fair to the safety of our officers. So we were forced to make a change there. We made that change quickly, but it was for a safety reason. And that's why that was an executive order and not posted with the 30 days. So that was the reason behind that. And what was the first question, Dan?
What the other 4 officer-involved shootings were that the homicide detectives investigated?
Yeah, those were probably outside agencies that requested us to do the investigation. So it was probably one of our partner agencies or one of our neighbors.
About the U.S. Marshal shooting that happened, where it was in the Inner East Side here in Portland, whether the Portland Police has the jurisdiction to do investigation into when a federal officer shoots somebody within the boundaries of the city.
I can find out if we investigated that one.
Great, appreciate that.
This will be the last comment. And TJ, and thanks, Dan, for your question. Chief answering.
My apologies to all. I thought I was doing questions, and then I thought I was going to be able to do public comments, so I don't mean to be monopolizing everybody's time. But Chief, I did have a comment that I prepared based on your report. You know, we've watched the public constantly complaining to me, because I'm my safety chair for my neighborhood, about how horrible Portland is and not seeing the incremental change that's coming. And along with those complaints come blame for every city agency and bureau and elected official doing their job. And it's frustrating that we're not going to turn part of we all do it. And the citizenry needs to get involved. And that can be successful if they're not giving their customer base what they want or need. And citizens are your customer base. And so we need to speak to you more often and speak to you more freely and give you feedback of our expectations so that you can do your job. And so when I'm reading through this, I appreciate the challenges you're mentioning. I know you're understaffed and overwhelmed, but I really am pushing you to prioritize public engagement. You've got to regain the trust of the citizens if we're going to get out of this. And whether, I mean, bureaus made mistakes, the public's made mistakes, but we got to get past that, and we've got to restore the relationship. And that's the only way Portland's going to come back to Portland. So if it's overtime for going to community groups or schools or ride-alongs or reaching out to chairs or whatever, I'm a taxpayer glad taxes that happened. It isn't, I understand what you're working with, the quality of time and the expectations. The one thing that you mentioned, and you mentioned it when you were reading your summary, was the callbacks to the crime victims. We have all those officers. I understand the bottleneck at the state. We're not going to have, you can hire all you want. We're not going to have them for a while. But if they could call every one of those crime victims, every one of those relationships that you repair, every one of those relationships that you mend, is going to serve all of us, me too, and not just you. So I really, really am pleading with you to please I know it's tedious. I know you guys work too many hours, but please come to all those meetings, go to all those churches, go to all those block parties. You've got to do it. That's our only hope. And I appreciate this report and all the technology of it and all your data and everything. I understand all that hard work, but this is just me asking you. We gotta fix this. We gotta do this together, and it's not going to work if trust isn't restored. That's what I wanted to say.
No, thank you for that, TJ. I appreciate that.
I think so. We have some time reserved for open public comment as well. I think we can more or less move into to that period. I think we're cruising towards the end of the meeting here. So I think Barb has her hand up here, and then Ashley has a comment in person here as well.
So I have an hi, my name is Barb. I use she, her pronouns. I live in the inner southeast. I have a public comment and a question or two for the chief. I agree with Dan about the formatting when making written incoming public comment to you guys. The fact that the formatting doesn't come through is really problematic to me. It makes it sort of not worth doing it, or if I was going to do it, I'd do a whole bunch of small comments. So that's just a general statement. Chief, I'm wondering what you think of the contact surveys and if there's any chance that that will get implemented. I know the COCO wrote a technical report on it, and it was actually one of the more interesting things I've seen them write. And then also Citizens Academy, I think that that is one of the best PR things you can do, and the ride-alongs, other than big group things. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Barb. I'm a believer in the contact surveys. I like the idea of them. Finding the best, most efficient way to do them is always the challenge. There is actually some technology we're looking at. There's a program, it's called Spider Tac, like SPIDR, I think, and it's kind of attached to, I don't know if it's like the CAD system, but it basically would send a survey kind of automatically to anyone who's had a police call, and then they could respond that way. We're looking at potentially seeing if that's a possibility, but I think to get feedback from people that are, having contact with their officers is very valuable to learn areas where we need to, to focus, where we're doing well, where we need to improve. So I'm definitely a fan of that idea. And I really like the community academies. I wish we could do them all the time. People get a lot of input. They get a lot of time to just ask questions, time to learn, and we get to hear from people and interact with them in a real positive environment. So, I love doing those as well.
Great, thank you, Chief Lil. My name is Ashley Schofield. I spoke earlier, but I introduced my name. I had a comment, and it was kind of piggybacking off a little bit of what TJ was saying in regards to the community connection and kind of restoring those, those relationships. And I just wanted to speak to, something I've definitely been behind, which is a community outcry for a better way of policing and thinking about public safety in our city. And, I just really want to make note that relationships have been broken and trust has been broken. And, we've got to get more creative on how the community will listen and come to you. I've been trying to say for a long time, we need the police to come to us, or, like having coffee with cops, like that is making us go to your territory where I think TJ was saying, and I think other folks are saying it, coming to more to the community meetings, like getting out there, saying like, hey, we want to listen, because I think Portland has said it, the community has said it loud and clear. We are going to have a community-driven policing department in this city, and we show up and we ask for accountability, and we ask we keep demanding it. And I just want to, make sure that that is sort of heard, because I think in like going back to the grammar and the accessibility of the document, the report, I think there is kind of a laziness to it as what I read, because again, that internal jargon, but also that kind of not sort of coming to the moment that the city the citizens, we want more accountability from the police, and I think, I think Tia brought it up with the training and that survey and that comment that came out. We haven't heard anything about an apology or kind of like taking ownership of that and that ripple effect that it has on what citizens think and the trust with the police. And we really need to be understanding that Portland we're going to do something different. Policing isn't going to be like it was 20 years ago. That is very key to that. And I'm, really proud to be part of PCCEP. I think we really do help bring the community to a space where they can feel informed and feel heard. And I hope that the Bureau and the Chief, what I've heard tonight, you are committed to that. But I think there's more actions that need to be done, and you coming to us instead of us coming to you. So thank you.
No, thank you.
I have a follow-up comment on the contact survey. Our subcommittee is very interested in that, the contact survey, and I reached out to city attorneys to ask. It's been my experience that something like that, the PPA might be not okay with it and might bargain to not do that. I'm thinking of the situation we're in with body cameras. Do you have any feedback on, you said that you've already looked at, is it called Spider? Yes. Have you passed that by the PPA? Have you talked to officers? What is the likelihood of that actually happening? Because I think that would be terrific. It's like whenever you go to the doctor or somewhere, you text, like, how was the service? I mean, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, no, I haven't talked to the PPA conference I was at. They had a booth and were presenting. I think a company, that Versaterm, who we use as our report management system, actually bought a couple years ago. So I'm hoping we could have them in for a demo, and it's something we could maybe look at. I think Bend, Oregon uses it, and they're pretty happy with it, according to the chief. So it's a possibility. I don't know where the union would stand on it, but I think it's a worthwhile conversation. And I think even from the union perspective with body cams and things like that, I think, they're not opposed to these types of things. They just want to make sure that whatever's implemented is fair to their members. But it's something that I intend to take a look at and just see if it's feasible for us here in Portland.
Would you support a contact survey program that is not housed within PPAB?
It's hard to say yes or no without seeing what it is and how it's going to be managed. But under the circumstances that it was, managed well and it was fair, and depends kind of what the circumstances surrounding it would be. But I wouldn't be like off the bat opposed to it.
I'm just thinking, I've been a public employee for almost 40 years. We send out all the time. We can say, I don't want the survey going out, or I want these questions, or I want to own the information. I'm just wondering, how do you see that working in the Bureau? I mean, you're a public employee. Feedback's great for everybody.
Yeah, no, I think the feedback would be good. It would just, like I said, all these ideas, are generally good, but it's the implementation that becomes the challenge. And I think it's just really a matter of how it would be done and how effective it would be. And, that's always like they said earlier, the devil's kind of in the details.
Any last public comment before we wrap up here?
I have one. Thank you. As we're getting ready to wrap, thank you very much, Dory. And it's just a state kind of I think in my scope of view right now, I see Celeste here as myself, and knowing the background, how long TJ has been, and then knowing also, Chief, your background and coming up, and those others as well. Those programs and opportunities being in the communities, from the pre to the basketball, already very familiar with that because I saw a lot coming up in your rank, as well as those who have retired. But hearing the plea from TJ with some of the things I know that you're already familiar with, and the urgency of plea is what I heard her giving and others are speaking about in the areas of trust and how that goes about building it. So that would be just me making a statement toward what they were saying. Thank you very much, Chief.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I'm not seeing any more hands. I'll give it.
There are a couple of questions in the chat. I'm sorry. Right at the bottom of the chat.
I think we can. Those are probably more for a different.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see any more hands. So I think we can move to conclude the main portion of our meeting here. We do have a few updates, or I guess what's next comments here. So what we have to wrap up June, we can go to the next slide. So we're gonna have PCCEP is gonna move to having biannual steering committee meetings. So we will meet twice a year, be convened by all of the PCCEP leadership, so our 2 full committee co-chairs and our subcommittee co-chairs, but supported by all PCCEP members. And the goal of this meeting will be to do we'll do a bit of a retrospective on the past 6 months. So how have things been going? What have been some challenges, some accomplishments, sort of a debrief about how that has all been. And then we will do some project planning, both with PCCEP members, but the intention is really to do that with all of you, with the community, bringing you in to help us envision, with how the past 6 months have gone, what we want the next 6 months to look like. So that will include an assessment of, I think, what sorts of issues we might want to focus on, and also what, form the work might take in terms of events or that kind of thing. So this is this is an event we're really excited about, really hoping to see a lot of community members there. If you can get the word out to your networks, and we certainly hope to see everyone here tonight at that meeting. That's going to be at the Louisa event space on MLK Boulevard on June 28th. Yeah, so that's all I got. Any final comments from our co-chairs?
Thank you all for being here. It's really wonderful to be back in community, in space with others, and look forward to more meetings like this. And thank you very much.
And Chief, we want to again, and all those who are here, the city officials, thank you for your report, and thank you for being here. We know, and again, as always, we're praying for your health, hoping you're feeling better. But to everyone that I do know, my sentiments about Portland, we're praying for those all out there, the families who are experiencing so much in our city. And I want to thank everyone that was here tonight for our virtual or hybrid meeting. And there's pizza, so plenty of pizza. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much again, Chief Lavelle and all of our PCCEP members, and all of our accessibility support and community members for some really, really good input. And we will make sure that PPV receives all written input tonight as well. Yeah, with that, the time is 7:41 p.m. and this
Good night, everyone. Thanks.
Good night. Thank you.